This morning's plenary session was proposed by NOMAS, the National Organization for Men Against Sexism. NOMAS, of course, is also privileged to be co-sponsoring this conference, its second conference collaboration with NCADV. The subject of our plenary is a vital and highly significant one, the concept of femicide and its connections with domestic assault. Prior to hearing about femicide, however, we will have a presentation of the 2012 NOMAS BrotherPeace Award to our distinguished honoree, Dr. Diana Russell, for outstanding lifetime achievement and leadership in combating violence against women. Dr. Robert Brannon of NOMAS will make the presentation. Dr. Brannon.
The Ending Men's Violence Network of NOMAS is concerned with a full range of men's violence, particularly in the context of sexism and patriarchal privilege. We periodically award our National BrotherPeace Award to an individual who has made significant lifetime achievements in combating men's violence. We are proud this year to name as the 2012 BrotherPeace recipient a woman who truly personifies those words, whose entire career of 40 years and still going strong has been focused on combating violence against women. A radical feminist scholar and world-renowned scientist, Dr. Diana Russell. Born in South Africa in 1938 to anti-apartheid parents, she was educated first there, then in London, then in the US at Harvard for graduate study. Her first book, 37 years ago, in 1975, was on rape, and it made a key theoretical contribution. Rather than being deviants, she argued that rapists were actually going along and conforming to deeply established misogyny and male sex role dynamics. It was a figure ground kind of insight which helped to transform how social science understood rape. Much more was to come. In 1977, she began planning and applied and received funding, and then in 1978, carried out what would later be recognized as one of the best and most important empirical studies in the history of social science. It was an interview study of a perfect random sample of all the adult women of all ages in a large city with carefully trained female interviewers closely matched to the respondents. The interviews approached the issue of rape in the most thoughtful, careful way that had ever been attempted, with numerous careful probes and without using the chilling word rape, which so many victims avoid and misunderstand. And only later, based on the details that the women revealed, deciding if what had happened actually matched the legal definition of rape. The results were startling. 24% of all the women in the large natural population had reported at least one experience in their life that met the legal definition of rape. Only 17% of those rapes had been by total strangers. 83% were by men who the women already knew. Less than 10% of the rapes had ever been reported, and almost none had ever resulted in an arrest or imprisonment. The original journal report of this historic study was in 1982, and over the next 4 years followed 3 exceptional full-length books based on this one study. Rape in Marriage in 1982 was the first scholarly book ever published on that subject. In 1984 came a volume that summarized all the basic findings and the methodology. It's one of the best accounts of rigorous feminist social science ever published. And it's the book you should look for if you would like to really understand this historic scientific work. It's a sage book titled Sexual Exploitation, Rape, Child Sexual Abuse, and Workplace Harassment. And then in 1986, this marvelous unmatched data set would yield another treasure: the secret trauma, incest in the lives of girls and women, was the first scientific study of incestuous abuse ever conducted. In recognition of both the topic's significance and the impeccable quality of the research, the secret trauma was awarded the C. Wright Mills Award, perhaps the most prestigious prize in all of social science. Incredibly, even many years after these data were collected, because of the remarkable quality of this study in a large natural urban population, those findings remain our best available scientific estimate, even today, of the prevalence of rape in women's lives. It is remarkable that more than 40 years after Dr. Russell conducted this innovative research, no other scientist anywhere in the world has conducted an empirical rape prevalence research study of equal methodological rigor and therefore of equal factual validity. This is true even of the U.S. government, which still cannot conduct interviews as well as Russell and her team did 4 decades ago, and in fact spends vast sums of money disseminating false and misleading statistics about rape, which harm women by vastly underestimating and distorting the problem. Now, for most scholars, the scientific and theoretical triumphs I've mentioned would already be a lifetime achievement. But Diana Russell, it seems, was just getting started. In a series of articles and books, she fearlessly attacked the complex issue of pornography. Her 1983 anthology, Making Violence Sexy: Feminist Views on Pornography, was the best collection since Take Back the Night. It contains a gem by Russell herself called The Expert's Cop Out, detailing how the scientific evidence of pornography's harms was minimized and obfuscated by the male researchers who testified to Congress. NOMAS will be offering a workshop this afternoon at 2 o'clock on unresolved issues within the anti-pornography struggle in the Grand Ballroom 4 right next door. And Dr. Russell has kindly agreed to join our pornography workshop, so you're welcome to come to that at 2 o'clock should you wish. Diana Russell's wide-ranging analysis of violence and movements to combat it have led her in many new directions, always with first-rate scholarship. Her book on how patriarchy fuels the nuclear arms race, called Exposing Nuclear Fallacies, was named an outstanding contribution to human rights literature in 1986. Having been a racial justice activist in Africa in her youth, Diana returned to South Africa in the 80s and interviewed anti-apartheid women, resulting in her book, Lives of Courage: Women for a New South Africa, of which Desmond Tutu said, "I fairly burst with pride that South African soil has produced such indomitable women, and not least the author herself." The subject of the plenary, which we will begin very shortly this morning, is the concept of femicide. Diana Russell first spoke this term publicly in 1976, and then in 1992 she co-edited the first ever anthology on the subject, titled Femicide: The Politics of woman killing. This was followed in 2001 by Femicide in Global Perspective. As we will hear very shortly, the term femicide, which is still not widely heard and used in the United States, has electrified the frontline feminists in many other countries and has led already to new legislation against the nightmare of woman killing in 8 different countries around the world. Many scholars of Diana Russell's fame and eminence tend to remain somewhat aloof from the grimy grassroots struggles against sexism and its agents, which feminists and domestic violence workers must fight every day. It is especially heartening that such a celebrated social scientist as Dr. Russell is also a radical feminist, which she demonstrates in street marches and militant, though nonviolent, protests. Her feminist activism, she reports proudly, has so far led to her being arrested 3 times in the United States and twice more in foreign countries. Catherine McKinnon has said, "None of the advances in understanding, documenting, and opposing violence against women in this country, including my own work, would have been possible without her groundbreaking studies and scholarly publication." NOMAS is delighted to award this memento of the 2012 National BrotherPeace Award for outstanding lifetime achievement in combating violence against women to Dr. Russell. After accepting it, in light of our full and rich agenda today, Dr. Russell will move immediately into our main and crucial topic today, the concept of femicide.
Really overwhelmed and I feel speechless, but I daren't be so. And I also do need help with keeping time because I can't just take it in. So while I'm talking and so on. So I would like some little prompts to try and keep within my time limit. And I don't know how to thank Bob enough for his generous, very generous and detailed tribute to me, but I'm deeply grateful to him, and also for all the work that he has put into having this session happen. It's surprising how much it took, and also what a pleasure he's been to work with. Of course, I'm profoundly grateful to NOMAS for honoring me by selecting me for this year's recipient of this BrotherPeace Award. It's as a revolutionary radical feminist who wants to eliminate patriarchy by any means necessary. I've never been considered peaceful before, but it's true that achieving this goal would make a 100% more peaceful world. So I see the BrotherPeace Award as honoring me for all my efforts in pursuit of this vision. And in appreciation, I have wished to donate my 2 books on femicide, well, my 2 co-edited books on femicide to NOMAS, and in appreciation for this very special recognition. I also am very grateful to Gretchen Shaw for her role in this session happening, and I've brought 4 books only because for her and for the National Coalition on Domestic Violence, because it's such a big organization. I don't know how she's going to handle sharing it, but it's for all of you too, but that's not my problem. So a lot of thanks, and I'm sure also for people, I don't know what efforts you have contributed to my being here, but I'm very grateful. And now greetings to all of you. What an amazingly large group, you know, especially since I was here before most of you came. So it's really inspiring to see all of you. And what's thrilling as well is to know that you are the tip of the iceberg. I say that because I'm trusting that you will go home and share with everyone you work with there what you have learned here and been inspired by here and so on, so that it's going to be reaching many more people. I just have a small favor to ask of you now. I'd like to, if I can ask you to raise your hands if you had heard of the term femicide before reading the program on which it includes that. Well, now I really am not prepared for that. I'm very startled. Maybe I should find another speech. This is, and also Bob has said quite a few things that I am going to say as well, and that is just that 36 years ago is the first time that I publicly used the term femicide, when I was testifying at the International Tribunal on Crimes Against Women that occurred in Brussels, Belgium, in March that year. And it was, the whole event was sort of based on personal testimony, which I am a great believer in. And I'd just like to read you a couple of passages from the testimony at that time that I read. This was not just authored by me, but somebody else as well. We must realize that a lot of homicide is, in fact, femicide. We must recognize the sexual politics of murder. From the burning of witches in the past, to the more recent widespread custom of female infanticide in many societies, to the killing of women for honor, so-called, we realize that femicide has been going on a long time, but since it involves mere females, there was no name for it until Carol Orlock invented the word femicide. These are the 20th century witch burnings. The men who commit these atrocities are acting out the logical conclusion of the woman hatred which pervades patriarchal cultures. And now for my definition. There was no definition. It was sort of implicit in what I said, but my actual definition of femicide is that it is the killing of females by males because they are female. The killing of females by males because they are female. This is comparable to defining racist murders as the killing of people of color because of their race. I refer to females because my definition includes girl victims, And I refer to males because my definition includes male juvenile perpetrators of femicides. Femicides also, of course, qualify as hate crimes and so-called bias crimes. Because my definition of femicide is limited to the killing, murders, homicide of females by males because they are female, murders that are not so motivated, for example, accidental killings of women by men, or any murders of women by men in which the victim's gender is irrelevant, or murders of women by their female partners, are not femicides according to my definition. I refer to these crimes as murders or homicides. Intimate partner femicides, as I'm sure you already know, having seen so many hands go up, is of course the type of femicide that most of you here focus on, as does Jackie and most of the researchers in the United States and Canada. And this, of course, you probably almost certainly also know, is the most frequent form of femicide in this country. Other types of femicide include stranger femicides by, serial killers, for example, other familial femicides by fathers, brothers, uncles, and other male relatives, and other femicides by perpetrators who know their victims but aren't related to them. For example, misogynist murders by acquaintances, authority figures, neighbors, babysitters, co-workers, and on and on. Since the tribunal in 1976, I've engaged in many different strategies in the hope that one or other of them would inspire feminists in the country to adopt this term instead of the gender-neutral terms murder or homicide, including co-editing these two anthologies, Femicide and the Politics of Women Killing, and Femicide and Global Perspective that Bob mentioned. While some academic researchers, most notably Jackie and her colleagues, adopted the term femicide many years ago and have done considerable research on this lethal crime, most feminists now here, you accepted, it seems, have most feminist activist organizations in the United States have, including activists against violence against women, have regrettably not adopted it. Now, again, your hands going up, well, that means you've heard of it. I don't know how much it means that you actually use it in your daily work. I hope it does, but if not, I hope it will be from now on. Many organizations even fail to mention murder of women as a form of violence. Somehow that gets left out, despite it being the most extreme form of violence against women. I have to say, I did notice that NOMAS is one of the organizations that doesn't include murder in your list. Now, you do say, etc., so, to quote from your statement of principles, we oppose such injustices to women as economic and legal discrimination, rape, domestic violence, sexual harassments, and many others. So I'm sure that femicide is going to get added very soon. Since the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence is the largest organization dedicated to combating violence against women in this country, I decided that addressing you on this vital, important term would be the most effective way that I could think of to try to disseminate this term to other activist feminist organizations, which is why I've been so eager to talk to you today. Now, this is the $100 question, or should I say $1,000 or $1 million question. Why do I consider it so important that all of you who work on domestic violence adopt the term intimate partner femicide? Firstly, the naming or renaming of different forms of women's oppression can play a critical role in mobilizing feminists to try to combat and prevent these problems. Before the term sexual harassment was invented by Catherine McKinnon to name the exploitive advances towards women made by millions of men in the workplace, this problem with no name was ignored by almost everyone, including feminists. Secondly, just as the law recognizes that racist murders of African Americans, Latinas, Latinos, Asian Americans, Native Americans, and other people of color are more serious than those that are not racist, and just as the perpetrators consequently receive longer sentences, or at least that's the intention of the law, how often it happens is something else, so you need to demand that femicides, including intimate partner femicides, must be treated as more serious than non-femicidal murders of women, and that the perpetrators of these crimes must similarly receive significantly longer prison terms than perpetrators of homicides against women. Now I wish to say more about the scope of femicides on this patriarchal planet. Femicides are on the extreme end of a continuum of the sexist terrorization of women and girls, including rape, torture, mutilation, sexual slavery, incestuous and extrafamilial child sexual abuse, physical and emotional battery, and serious cases of sexual harassment. Whenever these forms of terrorism result in deaths, they become femicides. And it's vital that we all realize that mass femicides have escalated to such a degree in India that Indian feminist scholar and activist Rita Banerjee describes what is going on there as female gendercide. In order to bring attention to this shocking reality, Rita founded the 50 Million Missing campaign in India. Just think about this large number if you can. 6 million Jews were exterminated in Nazi Germany. 20 million females have been wiped out in India. That is the situation today, and it's only going to get worse. But how many people even know about the massive scale of these femicides? This shocking fact is virtually invisible even to feminists. This highlights how urgent the following tasks are: to open our minds to the reality of these lethal hate crimes against women in whatever settings they occur, and to militantly demand that this undeclared war against us is stopped. So it's important to recognize intimate partner femicide, that is the main one you're concerned about, but also to see these annihilations in the context of femicides in general going on in the world, that gendercide is happening and yet nothing is happening about it. Female genocide is also going on in modern-day China. By the way, Rita, who is a friend and colleague of mine, only adopted the term femicide after we connected online last year, but she's now sees this as the major problem. There's also feticide is going on, which isn't the same as femicide, because it's the abortion of female fetuses, not yet human beings. So I am ardently hoping then that all of you will adopt this term after hearing our panel today. And I now wish to share some very inspiring news with you that Bob has already actually mentioned. I didn't know he was going to, but in December 2004, Mexican feminist congresswoman and academic anthropologist Marcela Lagarde invited me to speak about femicide at the first ever seminar on femicide in Latin America, I would suggest in the world. She told all of us there that her reading of my co-edited book, Femicide, The Politics of Women Killing, had revolutionized her thinking about this horrifying escalation in vicious rape, torture, and mutilation and femicides that were being perpetrated in that city. The impact of this book was due to its politicizing Lagarde's understanding of these barbaric misogynist murders. Lagarde asked me at that seminar if she could translate the term femicide into Spanish as feminicide. Of course, I gave her my consent, which was not needed, obviously. Anybody can take, define things as they think fit. However, I was delighted. Feminists in many other Latin American countries have now adopted the term femicide or feminicide, including Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Peru, and Portuguese-speaking Argentina, as well as Mexico. Now I want to ask you a question to think about, and perhaps to answer at the end of this session. Why do you think the first book ever published on femicide has had this enormous impact in Spanish-speaking countries, but not in the United States? This is a total mystery to me and a cause for great disappointment. I want to emphasize that adopting the term femicide is not just a simple substitution of one word for another, of femicide for homicide, just like, or spousal rape or marital rape. When the term femicide was adopted by feminists in Latin American countries, it resulted in their founding activist anti-femicide organizations, sometimes several in one country. A few of these organizations have even succeeded in pressing their governments to pass laws against femicide. For example, in 2008, members of the Guatemalan Congress approved a law against femicide and other forms of violence against women. The law is referred to simply as the anti-femicide law. Can you imagine such a law in this country? The law defined femicide as the, quote, violent death of a woman by virtue of her gender as it occurs in the context of the unequal gender relations between men and women. I think that's a very interesting and an excellent definition myself. The law included the following sentences for different types of violence against women. Femicide, a 25 to 50-year prison term. Physical and sexual violence, a 5 to 12-year prison term. Psychological abuse, a 5 to 8-year prison term. Now I want to share with you two highly bizarre facts. In an article by William Fisher titled House, meaning the US Congress, House Tackles Femicide in Latin America, he states, in an effort by a large bipartisan group of representatives to try to end a deadly phenomenon known as femicide in Guatemala and elsewhere in Central and South America, U.S. Democrat Congresswoman Hilda Solis said, and 85 co-sponsors introduced a resolution urging the U.S. government to bring pressure on Guatemala to address the unsolved murders of more than 2,000 women and girls in Guatemala since 2001. This resolution was unanimously approved by the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. What's so bizarre about this is that Congress is in total denial that femicides are also very prevalent in the United States. On the other hand, since the many U.S. feminist organizations, that even those that are trying to combat violence against women and assist the survivors, have not yet adopted the term. Take the rape crisis centers, for example. I mean, there's rape murder, rape femicides, and so on, attempted rape femicides. Maybe we shouldn't be that surprised. We can't expect the government to be ahead of us, can we? So we really are ultimately, need to use the term. And then we can demand that they use it too. The second fact that I consider highly bizarre is that the European Parliament considers it one of their crucial priorities to fight feminicides and gender-based violence against women, where? In Latin America. At their fourth conference on feminicide in March 2011, they pledged to treat individual cases of feminicide in these countries as cases of exceptional gravity, and vouched to support Latin American countries in their efforts to highlight, investigate, prosecute, and punish the perpetrators of feminicides, as well as providing reparations to the victims of these lethal crimes. I call this bizarre because I don't understand why the European Parliament is engaged in fighting femicides on another continent, as if thousands of femicides aren't taking place in the many countries in the European Union. In conclusion, I came to speak to you today because of my fervent wish that after this conference, NCADV will adopt the term femicide and intimate partner femicide in your policies. When I read your vision statement in which you state that NCADV strives to make issues relating to battered women and children one of the top 10 political and legislative issues in the US, I wish that you would refer specifically to issues relating to battered women and children, including femicide. Why omit your trump card when trying to convince patriarchal institutions about how serious the problem of domestic violence is and how urgently reforms are required? I'd also like to see stalking included in your vision statement. Issues relating to battered women and children, including stalking and femicide. The issue of stalking is another very dangerous threat that is most often perpetrated on battered women by their violent male partners, and which quite often culminates in femicide. In addition, I suggest that the NCADV consider setting up a task force to consider how to most effectively ensure that all your members adopt the terms femicide and intimate partner femicide as soon as possible. I will end by sharing with you my view that the survivors of wife abuse who have been severely battered, raped, stalked, been victimized by attempted femicide, who kill their male partners, are my heroines. Like many heroines, they have to pay a heavy price for their actions. But as long as the lives of these women are at serious risk of femicide because of the often scandalous failure of the police and patriarchal laws to protect them effectively, I applaud them for protecting themselves by any means necessary. An additional reason for my admiration for these women is that their lethal acts spare all the other women who would likely have suffered similar abuse at the hands of these same men. Getting them off the planet is a service to all women. Of course, I also favor the members of the National Coalition's demand that women who are incarcerated for killing their abusive male partners are recognized as victims acting in self-defense who must be released from prison. I also want to say, finally, how indebted I am for the vital work that you do for all abused women and for all of us. Thank you.
You have a way with a word, Dr. Russell.